The response by E Jean Carroll's lawyer, Roberta Kaplan, to Donald Trump's request to stay the enforcement of the $83.3 million jury verdict, now a judgment against him, is just chef's kiss perfect. Here's what E Jean Carroll's lawyer says to Judge Lewis Kaplan why, of course, he should deny Donald Trump's requested stay of the enforcement of the $83.3 million judgment. Attempting to sidestep his burdens, Donald Trump claims that E. Jean Carroll has conceded that he, Donald Trump, is good for the money and is now somehow precluded from suggesting otherwise. That argument is as baseless as it is misleading. To support it, Donald Trump points to evidence that E. Jean Carroll introduced at trial concerning his wealth, but evidence that Carroll offered at trial to support punitive damages is not a proper basis for Donald Trump to seek to carry his own burden in the post-trial setting. It was his duty to offer evidence at this stage, and he offered none. Moreover, even if it were properly considered, the limited evidence that Carroll offered at trial comes nowhere near close to carrying Trump's current burden under Rule 62.B to try to stay enforcement of the judgment. It's like the audacity of Trump. Trump saying, I don't need to show you, Judge, that I have $83.3 million in a bank account because E. Jean Carroll says I have it and we should just believe her and she's satisfied my burden. And E. Jean Carroll has conceded that she doesn't even want to enforce this judgment. She doesn't want to actually collect this money from me, Judge. And E. Jean Carroll's lawyer's like, what in the world are you talking about? That's not at all what was said there. And by the way, Donald Trump had just filed the other day in the New York Attorney General's civil fraud case before the appellate division there regarding the $464 million judgment against him. Trump says, this was his motion in the New York Appellate Division, which they rejected. In the absence of a stay on the terms herein outlined, that's where Trump wanted to just post $100 million, Trump properties, would likely need to be sold to raise capital under exigent circumstances, and there would be no way to recover any property sold following a successful appeal, and no means to recover the resulting financial losses from the Attorney General. So Donald Trump is actually telling one court, the appellate division in New York, that he doesn't have the money and needs to sell buildings. And now he's telling federal judge Lewis Kaplan in the E. Jean Carroll matter that, of course, he's got the money because E. Jean Carroll put on testimony during the trial that said that Donald Trump has all of this money in his account. And all E. Jean Carroll was showing were Donald Trump's statements bragging about his wealth at the New York Attorney General's civil fraud case, where Donald Trump would go out there and talk about how wealthy he is and that Mar-a-Lago is worth $1.6 billion. Remember when Donald Trump would say all of that? Let me just show you a little clip because this became the evidence against Donald Trump. So while he was bragging about his wealth in the New York Attorney General civil fraud case, where he had previously said Mar-a-Lago was worth under $26 million, E. Jean Carroll's like, bet, okay, so I guess you are a billionaire if you're claiming Mar-a-Lago is worth that amount of money. And that's the evidence for punitive damages. Play this clip.
We made a loan. We were very happy with the loan. We got paid back. There were no defaults. It was a very good transaction, and he would do it again. He was a very powerful witness. And we have other executives coming in from banks that will say the same thing. This is a disgraceful situation. This is an Attorney General, Letitia, that went out and campaigned on, I will get Trump. I will get Trump no matter what. I'll get Trump. I promise I'll get it. We have 2 tapes on her now that have come out since the trial because people took tapes of her because they couldn't believe her ranting and raving like a lunatic. But just as the Attorney General of New York State, Letitia James, and she shouldn't be allowed to be Attorney General. She's defrauded the public with this trial. She said that Mar-a-Lago, she convinced the judge that Mar-a-Lago was worth, in Palm Beach, Florida, the most expensive land in the world, I guess, and the most expensive houses definitely in the world, that Mar-a-Lago, the biggest house, the most spectacular place in all of Florida, was worth $18 million, when it's worth approximately, could be close to 100 times that amount. And based on that testimony, and based on her convincing the judge that Mar-a-Lago was worth $18 million instead of $1 billion to $1.5 billion, which would sell very easily, which we've already proven, but we'll have people come up and say that and prove it, the most important people, the brokers that make the sales. But based on that, he ruled against me. He ruled fraud. I mean, he said fraud. They are the fraudulent people, because they ruled a house that was worth 18, they put down as worth 18 million, and it's worth maybe close to 100 times that amount. And based on that, they ruled against me, having to do with fraud, which is a big statement. But they are the frauds, because the house is worth $1 billion, $1.5 billion, $750 million, which is worth a fortune. It's the most expensive house probably in the world, and they said it was worth $18 million, and they don't do anything about it.
If you're listening to the show, I can guarantee you're a news junkie just like me and my brothers. There's so much to keep up with. Believe me, I know. That's why the Washington Post is one of my go-to reads when it comes to catching up on the most important events of the day. This podcast is sponsored by the Washington Post. The Washington Post helps you go deeper on the news that matters to you. Their journalists bring you the facts and clarity about what's happening in the economy, on climate change, foreign policy, and other coverage that I use the Washington Post for. So whether it's updates on those topics or even things like dinner recipes, the Washington Post subscription has something for every type of news reader. Stories that explain the world, teach you something, and inspire you. I really enjoy the Washington Post's coverage on issues like the climate, on tech, and food. That's how I utilize the Washington Post, and I find their app to be sleek and easy to use and allows me to save stories later and follow my favorite authors on those topics. And if you need a pick-me-up, like I think we all do, check out the Inspired Life section that documents human moments and acts of kindness, and I'm pretty confident it will restore your faith in humanity. A Washington Post subscription makes it easy to access quality, trustworthy journalism, and it's affordable too. So go to WashingtonPost.com/Meidas to subscribe for just 50 cents per week your first year. That's 80% better than their typical offer. So it's truly a steal. Once again, that's WashingtonPost.com/Meidas and subscribe for just 50 cents per week for your first year. Let's take a look more at this motion filed by E Jean Carroll in her memorandum of law in opposition to defendant Donald Trump's motion to stay the execution of the judgment pending disposition of the post-trial motions. Listen to this scathing introduction right here by Carroll. Almost 1 month after the jury returned its verdict in this case, defendant Donald J. Trump filed yet another motion for a stay, this time to stay enforcement of the judgment without a bond or any other security that would ensure that plaintiff E Jean Carroll will be able to collect the $83.3 million that Trump now owes her. The reasoning Trump offers in seeking this extraordinary relief boils down to nothing more than, quote, "Trust me." He doesn't offer any information about his finances, the nature and location of his assets. He doesn't specify what percentage of his assets are liquid or explain how Carroll might go about collecting. He doesn't even acknowledge the risks that now accompany his financial situation, from a $500 million judgment obtained by the New York Attorney General to the 91 felony charges that might end his career as a businessman permanently. He simply asks the court to, quote, "Trust me," and offers, in a case with an $83.3 million judgment against him, the court filing equivalent of a paper napkin signed by the least trustworthy borrowers. Trump is giving the court a paper napkin signed by the least trustworthy borrowers. What a line. E. Jean Carroll's lawyer Roberta Kaplan goes on to say, there's absolutely no basis in law for Trump's requested relief. In fact, his position fails for 4 independent reasons. And then E. Jean Carroll's lawyer goes through the various factors here and says, Trump's motion is just trust me, bro. Bro, just trust me. Trump doesn't provide evidence of his assets. Trump doesn't provide a declaration, not a scintilla of evidence at all. And what E. Jean Carroll points out, though, is that not only did Trump fail to carry his burden, not only did he not provide any evidence at all, but more broadly, she says on page 9, Trump is certainly not an example of someone who has fostered transparency or trustworthiness when it comes to his financial situation. And then she goes on to describe all of the criminal cases against him. They go on to describe the other civil judgment in the New York Attorney General civil fraud case. And then E. Jean Carroll's lawyer says Trump's behavior over the past decades further supports that conclusion. After running for office and being elected, Trump engaged in a 4-year battle to keep his tax returns private, bucking the decades-long-standing practice of presidential candidates to give the public accurate information. And of course, Donald Trump has a history of outright refusing to pay people that he owes under the law, as some of his own lawyers have reportedly found out. Again, a very powerful motion here by E. Jean Carroll's lawyers, pushing back at Donald Trump for trying to stay the enforcement of this judgment. Alina Habba claimed that Trump has the money. Trump clearly doesn't have the money. And Trump gets to file a reply brief over the weekend. We'll see Donald Trump's brief, and then we'll see what the response is from Judge Lewis Kaplan. Then I think on the either March 6th or the 7th is doomsday for Donald Trump. That's when E. Jean Carroll will be able to enforce the judgment against Donald Trump. So that's what he's staring down on. She's got to seize those assets. Seize some of those buildings right away. Mark your calendar, folks. I'm Ben Meiselas from the MeidasTouch Network. Hit subscribe. Let's get to 3 million together. Have a great day.
Love this video? Make sure you stay up to date on the latest breaking news and all things Midas by signing up to the MeidasTouch newsletter at MeidasTouch.com/newsletter.